It's 5:30 somewhere. It's 5:30 here. We are starting our weekly Whitwam Organics garden report, and it being the every other week. Today we have an exciting interview topic discussion. We're going to be talking about our neighborhoods. I think at the very bottom where I kind of jump in and touch this discussion on our neighborhoods and how our neighborhoods are planned is I'm very involved with community gardens and community garden building. So that's kind of where our conversation is going to end up. But before you guys meet Sean, I'm going to get into our weekly garden report and nursery report. So last week we talked about strawberries and planting strawberries. I ran out last week. I am completely out of bare root strawberry plants. Thank you everybody who purchased them from me. We had a very busy week getting all those orders out. Now we did plant some in the nursery. Those will be up and ready as live plants in about 3 to 4 weeks. But kind of while you guys were all out there getting your bare root strawberry plants and planting them in your garden, I was also getting bare root strawberry plants and planting them out in some of these community gardens that I work with. And so that was last week. It's Wednesday, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then a little bit on Sunday, I was going back and visiting those gardens, and I want to tell you what I was looking at. I was looking at, in fact, Sean was at one with me this morning. I was looking at plants that looked darn near dead. And I just want to let everybody know that that's exactly what they're supposed to look like. So we've been going back to our plants and just kind of making sure that where the bare root strawberry plant is planted, they kind of flop over on their side. I told you if it flops over on its side, you know you're doing it right. Well, if you kind of stand the plants up, you might see some new roots coming out of the bottom of that crown. Also, some of your soil might have settled a little bit. Maybe a little bit too much of the roots is exposed. Also, on some of the plants, maybe some soil. You know, if you had the soil up a little bit higher here, maybe after rain or something, the soil came down, so they were planted a little too deep. So we basically just went in, been going into the strawberry beds and detailing them. Basically, when we were done, the leaves that still were looking good were still on the plants. We cut all the bad leaves off. A lot of the existing leaves are going to die. In fact, a lot of bare root strawberry plants, they come in with no leaves at all, or leaves that are completely dried out and brown. That's not the important part of the plant. The important part is the crown. And as it builds new roots, you're going to get new sprouts of the strawberry plant out of that crown. So what we've been doing with our strawberry plants, just to recap, is going in and trimming off all of the leaves that are now obviously dead and propping the plants up and just making sure that the roots are buried enough, but not too much. In fact, on a couple, I'd actually kind of hold my hand over the soil and grab the plant and pull it up just a little bit very carefully and then retuck some soil in around it. But we are getting new leaves coming up out of the middle, and we're definitely seeing some new roots growing off of the bottom of the strawberry crowns. So don't be alarmed if the bare root strawberry plants that you get look pretty dead after a week. What you're really focusing on is you're focusing on what does the new sprouts, the new growth of the plant look like coming out of that crown. If you're getting a new growth, new leaves, and if you can pull back some dirt and see new white roots coming out of that crown, you got a great healthy plant. And you just want to cut those older dead leaves off so that they're not, sitting in your bed molding and passing disease around in your garden. Man, it's been hot. I was completely wrong. I thought that last cool down that we got was going to be it. I thought it was smooth sailing, fall weather. But this morning in Tampa here, it was like 71 degrees, which is pretty good. It's tolerable. I think we're in the lower 90, 91, upper 80s for the daytime high. But we did hit a couple of days where the morning temperatures were like still 75, 76, and we were getting into the 90s. And man, our plants in our nursery and in the gardens, they were suffering. They were not looking so good. But we have another cool down coming. Oh, by the way, what I think messed my prediction up was that storm creeping up into the Gulf of Mexico. And basically, once it got north of us, it was bringing up air from the south and stopping that north air from pushing down like we really want it to. So hopefully that thing is gone and past us. I was looking at the wind forecast for the next 10 days, and it does look like we have some prevailing northern winds coming down from the northwest and then again from the northeast. So either way, as long as it's coming from the north, we're going to have some cooler weather. And if something happens and we start scooping up air from either the southwest out of the Gulf or southeast out of the Caribbean, it's going to be hot, humid air, and that could really mess things up. Why is that important? It's important because if you are growing some of these winter greens a little bit early, more heat tolerant winter greens, that's when you see stress, aphids, and problems like that on your plants. The reason why it's important to know that it's a cycle and to be looking ahead is because, well, if it's aphids is the problem, or some sort of other heat stress, and you know we have colder weather that the plants are going to enjoy right around the corner, sometimes you just gotta, cross your fingers and wait it out. Reaching for some pesticide, organic or not, is not always the best option. So it'd have to be pretty bad right now for my winter crops that I have in, for me to use pesticide. As far as once the days actually start cooling off and the days are getting noticeably shorter, the crops that we had in from the summer are definitely starting to show stress. If you have okra in right now, you might be seeing powdery mildew on the leaves, on the squashes, zucchinis, cucumbers, melons. We're definitely starting to see powdery mildew. Basically, that's going to be the name of the game until they're just completely devastated by powdery mildew. I, for one, choose not to use anything out in my gardens. We do use some Bacillus subtilis in the nursery, as well as our Capacity Plus, which is a product that contains chitosan, which is made out of shrimp shells, which has some beautiful antifungal properties to it, to take care of some of the more mold and mildew related fungus that you can encounter. Out in my gardens, I'm usually just cutting leaves off. If it's end of November, December, I'm just basically counting the days till that plant is dead and done anyway. So couple things to keep an eye out on: the aphids on your winter vegetables because it's been so darn hot, powdery mildew on your summer and fall crops, your warm season crops and your hot season crops. The whiteflies have kind of petered off for the most part, but not after a lot of our plants are completely bald from picking the leaves off and dropping them in soapy water. Rather than spraying the whole plant down with soap, I usually just try and manually remove the whitefly larvae, which are the white things on the underside of the leaves on the pepper plants. We really didn't get too much planted in the garden this week, and last week we were just busy getting orders out. We did some up planting. We have onions now in 6-packs. We have a midday onion, shown in red onion, and then we also have a short day onion, Super X, that is also available by seed, but it's getting a little too late to plant by seed. So let's see, what else did I do in the garden? We put carrot seeds in this week. Also been planting a lot of bean seeds, bush bean seeds, whole bean seeds out in my gardens. For the stuff that we have planted a few weeks ago, I think I remember telling you guys that we planted peppers, tomatoes, and eggplants, squash, cucumbers, and melons a few weeks ago. We have gone back through and done follow-up feedings on them with our micronutrient as well as our Compost Plus, which is basically the equivalent of like a compost tea, just to kind of give everybody a kick in the pants. So that's what we've been doing in the gardens all week. Kale's looking good. Chard. So we upplanted the chard out of plug trays the other day. This is the Swiss chard, a couple different kinds. We got Fantasia orange and flamingo. So these will be ready for sale here shortly, but the chard's looking really good. Chard out of your winter greens tends to be a little bit more on the heat tolerant side. However, it is one of the winter greens that is the most, I found, susceptible to both caterpillars and in the spring nematodes. I've had nematode problems on my chard before. So just a couple things. Right now, I don't have any nematode problems on chard, but in the spring, I have to keep an eye on that. But we have been having issues with caterpillars. So not in the nursery, but out in some of our gardens where we've already planted out the chard. We've also planted beets. Let's see, I mentioned carrots, beets, radishes. So we're getting a lot of those root crops in. This next week, I'll be planting out turnips in some of my gardens. And then just more and more of the leafy greens. So basically the stuff from late summer and early fall that we planted, tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, squash, melons, we're just letting those ride out. And we're working on working in those winter vegetables that we'll probably be focusing on until April. We might, broccoli, cabbage, all that fun stuff. So we're really not planting more of the tomatoes, peppers, eggplants in our gardens. You can, but I recommend buying bigger plants. This time of year, you should be buying stuff that was started a few weeks ago at the very least. So that's it. That's it for the nursery report. I am very happy to introduce to you guys somebody who I have had the pleasure of working with, and now I get to call him a friend. Sean, let me bring you in. Sean with Real Building. So let's see how I can do this. Hey, Sean.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. How you doing?
Good. Good to see you again. Second time seeing you today.
It has been. It's been twice today.
Yeah.
So you got some really cool stuff to talk about. Some stuff I didn't know before we were talking before the show. And I guess we could just kind of start with what did you go to school for your undergrad at USF?
Yeah. So I went to USF for environmental science and policy for my undergrad. Really enjoyed it. I've kind of been a huge nature and wildlife fan my whole life. And then senior year of high school, I took an AP environmental science class and kind of realized, okay, I could do this as a career. So going into USF, I chose to study environmental science. Went through my 4 years really enjoying it and really enjoying the subject matter and learning about sustainability and everything that we're doing to our planet in terms of climate change. But I really wasn't sure, what was next. And then luckily my senior year, my second to last semester, the director of the urban and regional planning program at USF came and presented to one of my classes. And I honestly didn't really know what urban planning was at the time. That's not something we're taught in public schools, which we should be taught. But I kind of just thought it sounded really interesting. The job prospects are really good. He sold it to us as, you can have any background and go into urban planning. It's such a broad field that you'll find something that you're interested in. So I kind of just took the leap, enrolled in the program, and never looked back. No regrets.
Yeah, you had said something I thought was kind of interesting, that before that you thought cities just kind of happened.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I didn't know urban planning was a thing. I figured, developers just bought land and built whatever they wanted and felt that people would, buy into. But it's much more complicated than that. I've come to learn.
It is way more complicated than that. So then you went to your master's program, which was in urban and regional planning.
Yeah. So urban planning is a very broad field. So I took classes on affordable housing, community development, transportation, zoning and land use, all of this good stuff, which I enjoyed all of it. It's all, essential knowledge. But at the end of the day, my interest was sustainability and creating sustainable places and helping the environment. So I focused all of my electives on environmental planning and coastal communities, green infrastructure and sustainable communities. Just any elective that had environmental or sustainability in it, I enrolled for it.
So this wasn't necessarily a master's program that was built for what you wanted to do. This was more of a program that you kind of catered a little bit more around your undergrad and what you were passionate about.
Yeah, more or less. And again, urban planning is so broad. You can do so many different things with it. And going into the program, I didn't know which direction I wanted to head. In my mind, I thought that I would become an environmental planner where I help plan for natural lands and conservation. But at some point, I kind of turned and went the other direction and went to the city side of things.
So was there a point where well, 2 points I'm going to ask about. Was there a point where you thought maybe you chose the wrong program, or were you kind of getting everything out of it from day one that you thought was going to be there?
Yeah, I never had any regrets, not
Okay.
for a minute, with that program. I learned so much, and it really enlightened me to everything that's going on around me. But I do feel like there was kind of a turning point in my program that led
Well,
me
that
in
was
the.
my second question, was going to be if there wasn't a point of like regrets but was there a point where the light bulb really came on and you got super excited and just really, really pointed about the direction you were taking?
Yeah, I think there was. So just a little bit of background. I grew up in a family that just loved nature. My mom raised my sister and I to be very appreciative of nature and wildlife. All of our family trips when I was younger, we never went to a city. We always went to Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, Alaska, all these wonderful, trips to visit nature. So going into, studying environmental science and then even going into urban planning, I didn't think that I liked cities. I always thought, cities were dirty and unsustainable. But then I took a course that was an elective for the urban planning program, and it was a course with the engineering college called Green Infrastructure for Sustainable Communities. And that really opened my eyes to the fact that cities are actually can be more sustainable if planned correctly. Density and having more people in less space actually saves much more land for conservation. It allows you to have things like public transit and walkability, so you don't need to rely on automobiles. There are just so many benefits to a well-planned city that I never realized until I had really started to study it and be in the weeds with it.
So you said that before we got on here, I asked you kind of how you met Taylor and Real, and you said that you just started putting out applications, or you did a Google search. What did you say? You did a Google search for what?
Yeah, I just Googled Tampa sustainability.
Okay.
Pulled up, had this email drafted and kind of just catered it to each different organization or person I was reaching out to, and happened to stumble upon my current boss, Taylor Ralph with Real Building Consultants. Sent him an email, told him where I was at in my life, undergrad environmental science, studying urban planning. And he said, yeah, that sounds really cool. I think I might have a use for you. Let's meet for coffee. And we did. And then the rest is kind of history.
So, and then you kept going, right? Even after your internship was up, you kept interning?
Yeah. So originally I was seeking out the internship, obviously for the experience, but it was part of my degree requirement to do 1 semester of internship. So I did that, and then Taylor was kind enough to keep me on for another semester while I finished my degree, and then I started working with Rio once I graduated.
And what kind of things, like what kind of projects do you work on? The projects that you work on, what role do you play? Mm-hmm. And like currently, in the past, but then also, like, where do you really want to take this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like I said, I started as an intern, and the reason that Taylor hired me was because, so Real, we do green building design and certification. That's our bread and butter. We do LEED certification. It's the premier worldwide green building standard used in over 150 countries across the world. It stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. It's a standard for green buildings, so there's kind of a checklist of sorts that you can refer to for guidance on how to make your building more sustainable. So there's categories related to energy efficiency and water efficiency, all the way to the materials that go in the building, the indoor environmental quality, lighting and air quality, and thermal comfort. So it's a really comprehensive green building system. So Real, we had that pretty much down pat. He hired me on to help with the LEED certification stuff, but also figure out what else we can do. We have a bunch of existing clients, amazing clients like USF and University of Tampa and the YMCA. And we were just kind of wondering, what else can we do besides green building certification? Because we like to say you can design the most sustainable building in the world, but if you walk outside and you have derated air quality, or you get hit by a bus because your roads are unsafe, then is it really that sustainable? And it's not. The things
Right.
between
It's just a small piece of the puzzle.
exactly everything between the buildings and everything that people do outside of the buildings matters as well. So we're kind of trying to grapple with that and figure out how else we can help.
Now, with a lot of y'all's clients, do you feel like as you kind of maybe work with them and progress more, and come at them with more ideas, are they ready to go? I mean, are they hungry for more? Is this something that is like, where's the supply and demand sitting at as far as well, we know on the need side of it, but I mean on the want side of it for businesses and organizations, are they really eager? Because it seems to me like they are.
Yeah. Every market is different. So like obviously out west in California, pretty much every building is a LEED building. We're a little bit behind the curve here, but just in the 3 years that I've been with Real, I've seen the demand, skyrocket. So yeah, it takes a special type of client in this atmosphere to want to do LEED certification, because bottom line, it does cost a little bit more money, but in the end, there's so much more value added beyond just obviously the monetary savings of water and energy efficiency. There's so much value added that is hard to quantify, like worker productivity increasing because you have a healthier indoor environment and everything like that. So it does take a special type of client. We are seeing more of a demand for it in this market, though.
Where are we at as a city and as a county on more of the overall overarching planning, moving in a more sustainable direction? Is it? I mean, like where are we? I mean, 5 or 6 years ago, I would have I was in this 5 or 6 years ago. I felt like everybody who was trying to do anything like this, it was just swimming upstream.
Mm-hmm.
And now, from where I sit, and I think you have a deeper perspective on this, it seems like we're getting more and more people in the right positions that are not just willing to hear another way of doing things, but they're looking for other ways of doing things. Like, we don't need to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to give them what they're looking for. Is that,
right.
Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah. So as a city, the city of Tampa, we're honestly a bit behind even our peer cities, Orlando and St. Pete. I will say props to Mayor Castor. She did hire the city's first sustainability and resilience officer this year, which is a huge move forward. Orlando and St. Pete have had those positions for years. Orlando has like 12 employees under their sustainability department. So like I said,
I think even Largo has, Largo has one.
Largo happened before us, Dunedin, Oldsmar.
Dunedin, Oldsmar, yep.
So like I said, we're behind the curve, but we're catching up quickly. And it really is who you put in your leadership positions, who we elect to our leadership positions, city council, mayor, and county commission. It makes a huge difference. So our last mayor wasn't as amenable to sustainability initiatives as our current mayor is. Our current mayor definitely seems to get it, not just from this is what we have to do because all other cities are doing it, but also, this is good for our people, this is good for our local economy, and it's good for our environment, which we need to thrive. We're a tourism-based state. Sustainability should be at the front of all of our minds. So
I'm going to tell our audience where in our paths I think we met. And that was, here I am running a nursery, selling seeds, fertilizer, working with people in backyard gardens, community gardens. And over the years, as I've gotten more involved with more organizations that are involved with what I'm doing, I started figuring out very quickly that, it wasn't just about science and plants and teaching people how to grow, or to be successful at growing. What it came back to, and what the core of it was that I was working with people and I was working with food.
Mhm.
And the day I figured that out, I actually wore this on purpose. I changed my company motto from "We'll get you growing" to "We build gardens and grow gardeners,"
Right.
because I started realizing that what I was doing was really about people and their food. That got me involved with the Tampa Bay Network to End Hunger. It got me involved with, rubbing shoulders with Feeding America, and kind of getting wrapped up with. I met a great gentleman, Will Carey, with Tampa Bay Harvest. We did some projects together, and so basically, I think I went from gardening to gardening with people to gardening with people and being interested in their food, and started realizing I remember the first time I heard the term food desert. And that's where a grocery store is a certain distance away from somebody, and then there's even people who even the bus stops to get on a bus and go to a grocery store are even redunculous far away. So I had no idea what a food desert was.
Mhm.
Um, I had no idea what food insecurity was. The idea that maybe you're not starving, but maybe at some point during the week you have to make a choice between one or two meals a week, a day, or paying a medical bill. And I guess that's when I started becoming interested in food security, community gardens, and realizing that because I tried to build some, and I tried to build a lot of them, and
Mhm.
there was issues with zoning, just with this is predating us. We finally in Tampa got a community garden ordinance where we can have community gardens on residential lots by pulling a permit for that. Um, but it wasn't as easy and it wasn't as accepted back then to even have the thought of growing food on a large piece of property for the community to come together and share the food in these food deserts. So I started, I guess, what I'm trying to get at is I started getting a little bit more involved, and not involved, but understanding on the planning side of things and kind of the political side of things, and the food security side of things. Um, and I kind of feel like that's how we met.
Mhm. Yeah, I think so too.
You were there because of what you were doing, and I was there because of what I was doing.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, it was still a garden in the middle of a food desert that was trying to feed people um, who needed it, or even just have that time in the garden.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of from my angle how I think we came together and met. Give me your take on it.
Yeah, I agree. So obviously, my boss Taylor knew you before I knew you, and I was interning. We were trying to figure out, what else can we do in terms of sustainability for our clients, and gardens kept coming up as a conversation piece. You could have a garden at any building, really, whether it be a school, a daycare. They work well anywhere. So Taylor kind of encouraged me to go visit the UACDC garden. Shout out to Erica Nelson, one of your past guests from last month. Yeah, so that's where I kind of started to fall in love with gardens. Obviously, I knew about gardens. I knew that they were, more sustainable because your food comes from so far away normally, and industrial agriculture is really destructive on our environment. But I never really got it until I started volunteering regularly with you and Erica and kind of seeing it. So in the beginning, I was purely looking at it from this is good for the environment. Community gardens save emissions and they're good for the planet. And that kind of evolved to, these are good for community. These are great places to meet your neighbor. These are great places to get safe outdoor physical activity, great places to learn responsibility and to learn about environmental science. So I owe that to you for always hammering that in. it's not about the vegetables. It's not about the produce. Those are an amazing byproduct and kind of the cherry on top of the sundae. But it's really about the people and what people learn from being in the garden and connecting with their neighbors.
Well, they're connecting with their neighbors. And even if you're not like on a massive scale supplementing their diet from what comes out of these community gardens, you're still connecting them with their food.
Right.
You're still giving them a connection to this thing that we rely so much on. And so many people are just, so I almost feel like there's a dual synergy there, because you're simultaneously connecting them with their neighbors, with their neighborhood, and in general with food. Because I just, we all grew up in a world where does food come from? The store,
grocery store,
the restaurant. That's where food comes from. Yeah. And so even just giving people the opportunity to put their hands in the dirt and stick a seed in the soil and watch it grow, and then many, many weeks later, I can't even tell you how many people have left the garden. They stick with it for a few months and they're like, man, I have so much more respect right now for farmers, because that tomato took so much effort to grow. And it's like, I mean, sure, and farmers have much more efficient ways of doing things on scale, but still they get the idea that this isn't just something that comes into existence. But I really like what you said about it building connections between the neighbors. So the gardens aren't just a place for people to get outside, exercise, but it's almost like a neighborhood water cooler kind of. People come in, especially during this pandemic. I've seen that a lot at the gardens that we've kept open. And some of the people who've come out to our gardens to volunteer, who are staying a little bit more sheltered, haven't really been in that close contact with a human being, intimate contact. I mean, they've gone to stores and stuff, but not sitting there working far apart, but side by side, pulling weeds, talking with somebody. So there definitely is that connection that people get on so many levels in these gardens. And that kind of leads me into what the main point of what I wanted to talk to you about today is: do these gardens, or gardens in general, have a place in our urban planning and development? And if so, I think that answer is pretty obvious. But if so, why? And then how? I mean, I have a couple small ideas, but I want to hear some of yours first.
Yeah, so obviously the answer is yes. They belong there, and we need them there for so many reasons. So a couple of which we already rattled off. But so let's just kind of break it down in the different types of urban agriculture. So you have the community gardens, which is what we kind of specialize in. You have urban farming, which is a commercially productive urban garden, if you want to compare it to that. You have hydroponics and indoor farming and vertical farming, and then also aquaponics, which are the more technologically advanced forms of farming. But they all serve a purpose, and they all can play a part in our larger local food system. So a couple reasons why. Obviously, as we know, industrial agriculture is really unsustainable. So I think the figure is your average meal travels 1,000 miles before it makes it to your plate, which is just insane to think about. Not to mention, to grow it, we bulldoze acres and acres of natural land and then fill it with pesticides and chemically based fertilizers, which then run off into our water systems and pollute the nearby communities that are nearby them. So that's number one. Number two is produce is more nutritious when it's fresh off the vine and closer to where it's being consumed. Produce releases nutrients over time once it's not on the vine anymore. So having places to produce these fruits and vegetables closer to our cities, one, is more sustainable. Two, it's healthier. They hold more of their nutrients when they're consumed closer to harvest than when they're not, than when they're sitting on a refrigerated truck for a week before they even make it to the grocery store. So how do we do it? It's going to be a combination of all of the different types. So at-home gardens are going to be key. Community gardens, if a church has some extra land, throw a community garden on there. It's going to be great for the people of the church, the community as a whole. There are ways to do urban farms, which are obviously economically productive. They create jobs, which keeps more money in the local economy versus when we buy our strawberries from California. And then we need some zoning and code changes to allow for indoor farming and vertical farming and hydroponics. Currently, the last time I checked, a couple months back, in Hillsborough County, the only place you can do indoor hydroponics is in an industrial or agriculturally zoned zoning district, which made sense back in the day when we were trying to separate different types of uses. You don't want a farm next to a school with all these harmful chemicals, but hydroponics, you could walk by a building with hydroponics in it and not even know that it's going on. You could have no idea. So there's really no outputs, no negative outputs that should be keeping these forms of production from being inside of our cities.
Well, I think it's been a year or so since I checked, but the last time I checked, being a business in the city of Tampa, when you go down to get your business tax license, you have to tell them, like, I'm registered because I go into people's properties and work in their garden. My business is registered as both, three things. I'm registered retail, e-commerce, landscaping, and then also nursery. If I wanted to add to that, get on a commercial property in Tampa, forget the zoning. There isn't even a business tax designation for me to be an agricultural farmer in the city of Tampa. So that means either A, I have to figure out the closest thing to it and fudge it, right? Which I guess wouldn't be that bad, except for the fact that if I got over 5 employees, and actually you have to get workman's comp insurance for them, and that has to be exact to what they do. A few years back, I had more than 5 employees, and I had workman's comp insurance with everybody. And I had one employee that did multiple things. I actually had to put his hours in. He had to tell me how many hours a week he did X and how many hours a week he did Y, because I paid different amounts for his workman's comp depending on what his job was that he was doing. So anybody who's watching who doesn't know exactly what I'm saying, you can't go down to the city of Tampa and register your business as a car wash and then mow lawns. I mean, I guess you could do that, and you probably wouldn't be in that much of a trouble or issue, except if something happens and both your general liability insurance also registers what you do for a business, your business tax registers what you do as a business, your county registers your business and what you do, the state registers your business and what you do, and workman's comp insurance measures what you do. And for everything to be on board, really should be the exact same business designation around all of those things, which should also be exactly what you do. And the bottom line is with urban agriculture, that's not possible. And Tampa's not alone. So zoning aside, sorry, there was my soapbox.
Yeah, that was a solid rant, David. But yeah, I mean, being a gardener and a farmer is hard enough. There shouldn't be this many hoops to jump through from the municipal level to be able to just do it legally and safely. It's a little ridiculous.
We had a local urban farmer. I'm not going to mention their name, but they're not within the city limits anymore. But when they were, they had to have their business was registered as a nursery.
Right.
Because there was no other way to register their business.
Yeah.
So, we have, as far as growing food more locally, we got some work to do. And I think you hit something on the head, and that was that designation between kind of agriculture and like indoor hydroponic setups, because personally, I think they should be allowed more in any area or neighborhood where there are other businesses that what's the word I'm looking for? That have the same impact.
Mhm.
Because I think that's really what we're talking about, right? Is
Yeah.
like, what are these businesses' impact on the community?
Mhm.
So for
Yeah.
people who are watching who don't understand what I'm saying, if there's a little strip mall in the middle of a neighborhood, kind of off of a side street, maybe that isn't even a stoplight, and it's surrounded by houses, that might be a commercial, some different commercial zoning designation. In other words, all that can open there is a bookstore, maybe a lawyer's office with less than a certain number of clients per month, and a shop that sells dog food,
Mhm.
maybe a bicycle repair shop. But you couldn't open up a shop that, say, paints cars, or a restaurant with a certain number of tables expecting a certain number of people through there. So
Mhm.
basically, other commercial businesses that operate in an urban environment, where they're allowed to operate in that urban environment is measured off of impact. What type of impact they're going to have on those communities. I don't think we're talking about throwing that stuff out the window, right?
No, definitely not. And like I said, I don't think the county is intentionally, keeping hydroponics out of our cities. It's just, the way things are. It's just old zoning, which is changing. It's being revisited across the country. There's a lot that was done with zoning historically that is very much frowned upon today, and has, created a lot of issues in our society that are kind of a lot of planners are going back, a lot of cities are going back and trying to rectify those errors.
Yeah, I think zoning laws in general come from a pretty bad place. I mean, from my understanding, it's kind of rooted in, well, it is rooted in racism,
Mhm.
and keeping, certain groups of people living in certain areas and keeping certain businesses in certain areas and neighborhoods. Um, and what I mean, I don't want to derail this conversation because I think that's a whole nother talk for a whole nother day. But I think it's important to point out
For
that
sure.
that with a lot of our current zoning laws and the way our cities are set up does not come from a good place. And so it's not a surprise that it doesn't just magically get fixed, even when there's a lot of well-intentioned people. Um, it's also my understanding that the way our cities are laid out with the sprawl and such is also from lobbying from the fossil fuel and automobile industries,
Yep.
because I don't think they have a vested interest in us having more walking communities, right?
No, definitely not. You're 100% correct on everything you just said. So I think originally the public justification for zoning was, we don't want to build schools next to power plants and whatnot, that's fair. We don't want to do that. But I think the real justification was to exclude certain people from certain communities. So the type of zoning that we have had historically is now referred to as exclusionary zoning because it excluded people intentionally with things like density maximums, height restrictions. So if you are restricting how tall you can build buildings and how many housing units you could have on an acre, you are directly impacting how much those units are going to cost. So obviously, if you limit the number of housing units, you limit the supply, the price is going to go up. And that was a very well used technique to keep people of color out of certain communities, as well as zoning already known communities of color to be near harmful, industrial.
Right, that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're totally right. A lot of it is rooted in racism and has created so many issues for our society. And then automobile is just a whole nother discussion.
I know,
Yeah,
right?
that's like the bane of my sustainability existence is the automobile, because you have the emissions and those are terrible, but there's so many different impacts that automobiles have on cities. If you think about downtown Tampa, think about how many parking lots we have, and now think about if all of those parking lots weren't needed and could be developed into green space or affordable housing, or if and the way that we are zoned and the way we develop it is like a feedback loop. So
It
we
is.
build a car, so then we need to provide more space for cars. So then we have less space to build, and we need to build further apart, and then you need a car to get around.
Right.
So a lot of, obviously a lot of cities are realizing this and doing a lot to change it and reinvest in public transit and safe bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. But Florida is definitely the epitome of suburban sprawl.
I don't think so. I think Texas, from what I've heard, I think
Okay.
they've got us. I think they've got us beat.
Yeah, that's
But we're not
something I'm willing to lose on that one.
Yeah, we're not. Yeah, exactly. We're not too far behind, though. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But I did like what you were saying about instead of trying to spread people out more, because there's more people, is actually more environmental to try and pack them in tighter.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, when you have denser communities, they're more walkable, first of all. So when you're talking about historical exclusionary zoning, you have your residential here and your commercial over here. Whereas today, there's much more mixed use zoning being implemented, where you could have commercial and residential on the same street, maybe even in the same building. Retail on the bottom, office on the second floor, residential units on top. And that just makes it so that you don't have to drive everywhere. If you have a grocery store downstairs or even a dentist, maybe that's one car trip that you could have saved. And on top of that, denser communities make public transit more efficient and effective and cost effective, as well as biking and walking everywhere.
So that's really interesting that you brought that up, because I kind of feel like Tampa's trying to do it backwards. Like, which comes first? Denser, more well thought out communities, or better public transportation? Like,
Yeah.
or is it a positive feedback loop that you need to get into, just like we're in a negative feedback loop with the cars?
Yeah, exactly. We kind of have to reverse that feedback loop by doing a little bit of everything. We need to build denser communities that are along well-funded transit routes, that also have safe, protected bicycle lanes, that are nearby, community amenities that you can walk to. So it all has to happen kind of concurrently, and it is happening. It's definitely happening slowly, but we're making some good progress in Tampa, and I'm very hopeful. We passed a sales tax a couple of years back for the Hillsborough County to help fund transportation, which transportation is the backbone of any city and is really the backbone of a sustainable city. You cannot have a sustainable city if everyone has to drive everywhere. It's just that simple. Even if you have electric vehicles, you still need a place to put all the vehicles. And like I said, that results in massive parking lots, which go unused for large portions of the day, which makes housing more expensive, and we have less green space because of it, and less walkable environments.
So, I mean, this kind of brings us back to the gardens in green spaces, maybe in the neighborhoods that don't have the grocery stores with healthy food. I think the last time I looked at the food desert map for Tampa, we even found a few areas that weren't officially. I think Tampa Bay Network and Hunger changed the color on the map, because some things that were actually designated as grocery stores. This is through the SNAP program, the EBT SNAP program. They're designated as grocery stores. Someone actually went out and visited them, and it was really just a convenience store with convenience store food and a couple boxes on the floor with some old tomatoes and onions in it, and some dirty old bananas on the counter.
Yeah,
I guess that's what they needed to get their EBT and their SNAP. So they had to take that grocery store off, and then all of a sudden, bam! This whole area more became a food desert, because the next real grocery store was so far away.
For sure.
And I don't know, like what can we do as a city, as individuals? What can people who are watching this do? Who can we contact? Who do we get involved with as far as, being involved with the planning and development of the city that we live in?
Mm-hmm.
Is this just something that we have to look into? Is this something we can do at the ballot box? Or
Mm-hmm.
are these more positions that are hired positions that we need to put pressure on somebody else or in a different direction?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. So the ballot box definitely matters. Here in the city of Tampa, we have a strong mayor. So the person that we elect as mayor is really important because they could do a lot. But we also have a city council with 7 members, and they also do a lot. Developments go up before them, and they approve or deny them based on form and function and design. And in the past, a lot of development that probably shouldn't have been approved in certain neighborhoods that didn't contribute to what the comprehensive plan had laid out for that neighborhood were approved because of basically special interests and development money. So and it also matters obviously who the city is hiring. But a lot of the people in the planning field now, they get it, and it's well known that the way that cities were planned in the past was more or less just incorrect and not the ideal way to do things. And a lot of city planners today, their job every day is kind of fixing those errors and finding out ways to more or less retrofit our cities to be better planned.
So specifically, like where are the pressure points?
Mm-hmm.
If people are interested in getting involved, like, and if you don't know off the top of your head, I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot. Mm-hmm. We can always go back on this video and add to the comments.
Mm-hmm.
But who do people write? What organizations? Who do they call if they want to get involved with the fact that there aren't the right grocery stores or industrial neighborhoods or next to residential neighborhoods, without like a commercial next to a residential, but without anything really for those people in those neighborhoods to use? So basically, the only thing that those businesses are there for are for cars coming into the neighborhood and using those commercial businesses, right. Which isn't a bad thing. But if there's nothing there for the local neighborhood, I think that's where we run into problems, right?
Yeah. So a lot of that comes down to city council.
City council? Okay.
Yeah. City council meetings have time for public comment at the beginning of each meeting and during each agenda item. So kind of keep a lookout on the city council agendas for things that may impact your neighborhood. You could always oppose a development and make your case as to why you're opposing it for that neighborhood. As far as locating grocery stores in neighborhoods, that unfortunately comes down to economics. Grocery stores won't locate in a neighborhood if it doesn't meet a certain area median income. So simply, Publix won't build in a Publix in a neighborhood if the surrounding neighborhood doesn't make an average of, I think it's $45,000 a year per family or something like that. So a way to fix that is to focus more on local economic development, fund public transit, fund affordable housing, fund things that are going to lift up our community rather than keep them in poverty.
Wow, real big picture.
Yeah, it's complicated and it's messy and everything is connected, but there are ways to make progress. Right.
And in the meantime, hey, Amanda, in the meantime, we could be building more gardens in some of these open green spaces in the neighborhoods and in the communities. I'm kind of coming from it from an angle of more of a, this is why I was saying like where's the specific places that people can put pressure on. I'm coming at more of a buckshot theory of if I can get more of the right people into these gardens and talking about gardens and talking about food. And like, I think there's a lot of people in our community in Tampa, and I think this is probably every community across the world, who are no names, but they know the right people, and can make differences that we can't. So getting those people into the gardens and into the garden and into the food conversation, and just educating as many people as possible about our food system, about the fact that food deserts even exist. And some of the ideas that I've kind of thought about is maybe getting in touch with either apartment developers, or even, I know we were talking about sprawl is bad, but it still happens. People who are building subdivisions, and maybe pitching them the idea that having a community garden for your, and I'm not just talking about one apartment building, I'm talking about the ones that are like complexes, you know, where maybe there's like one pool and some racquetball courts. So they're, and especially coming out of these times when maybe there's going to be a little bit of a surplus, just a little bit, but people are still going to be building, people are still going to be needing apartments, that they might be more willing to listen, because having a cool amenity on the property, like a community garden that the people who live there can use, that might, you know, be the thing that keeps people living there or wanting to rent there. And I think when I first talked to you and you told me about your passion and your and your direction, that's almost like what I immediately pictured in my head, is like, you know, building the green subdivision of the future, which may already include, you know, gardens and green spaces, and usable spaces, community gardens. The other place I was thinking about was getting in touch with some of these larger businesses that are moving into the Bay Area that have over 50, 100, 200, 500 employees, and seeing if maybe they want a community garden at their business for their employees to be able to use. Some of these bigger businesses that I've already visited, you know, they might already have a walking trail that goes around the business's campus. They might already have a volleyball court set up. I even went and visited one that had its own cafeteria for the employees to eat lunch at. And every day they made a dish at the cafeteria that the employees could get points on. And so the walking trail around the campus and the volleyball court and the food that they served, and these points that they got, all went toward incentives to their blanket insurance policy for their health. So basically, like, I don't know, if the company overall got so many points with all of these employees, then the business, I'm assuming, got a break. Well, what if I could get community garden on campus included in that? And that's what I'm trying to say, is like, then those become places where these kind of conversations begin to happen.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I've lived at several apartment complexes by USF, and they all had this sad-looking tennis court with potholes in it that needed a new paint job that no one used. And if they had instead put a garden there, they would have differentiated themselves from every other apartment complex that had the same thing, and would have actually provided an amenity that their residents might have used. But yeah, I totally agree. And one of the reasons I love community gardens is because I feel like they could be plopped down with any organization and just fit in so well to their mission and programming, whether it be like an apartment complex, you know, providing a way for residents to meet each other, whether it be a school to, you know, educate children, even, you know, nursing homes or like rehab facilities. You know, you can put a garden anywhere and people will find a good use for it, and they will be able to benefit from it.
So we're hitting the 1 hour mark here. I'm going to jump because we got some good stuff from Kenny and Amanda. Hey guys, by the way, thanks for watching. And I'm not being rude. I'm looking down here at my laptop because I can't see this far away to read what's on my phone. So Kenny Gill, I'm just going to put this up really quick. Let's see, show. All right, so Kenny was recommending something to read called Geography of Nowhere.
Nice. I'll add it to the list.
Add that to the list. And then Amanda Streets says there are so many community members that want food forest parks and city streets lined with fruit trees. The cities I've spoken to are nervous about liability and waste. Do you know of any cities that I could cite as an example? What's going on with Atlanta that you know of? You've looked into it way more than me.
Yeah, so Atlanta actually has a really robust city-led urban agriculture program. It's called Aglanta, also a really cool name. They have a conference every year that I've been to a couple times, and one of the tours was to one of their food forests. So they have the largest food forest in the country, 7.1 acres. They beat Seattle's 7-acre food forest by 0.1 acres. But it was really amazing, and it was a partnership between a bunch of different organizations, but among those was the City Aglanta program, a bunch of different nonprofits, Trees Atlanta, and several urban agriculture nonprofits. And ultimately, they created on this vacant parcel that was supposed to be developed 15 years ago into townhomes that the developer just never went through with the project. Located in a neighborhood with a lot of elderly folks and minorities, and they built this 7-acre food forest, which has I think it's 6 or 7 different layers of food. They have the food growing under the ground. They have the ground cover. They have bushes. They have trees. So many different layers of food, and it's accessible to the neighborhood. It is open to volunteers. They have raised beds where they're also growing food, and it's really inspiring just to see it and to see that this was a city-led program. They partnered with a bunch of nonprofits and got a bunch of grant money, but it was led by the city, and it is possible anywhere if Atlanta could do it. I like to think that Tampa is Atlanta a couple 20 years in the past. I think Atlanta's a little bit ahead of us, but similar.
Nope. I think you just hit it on the head that this is going to take government, and it's going to take people from the nonprofit world and people from the for-profit world all being at the table together.
Yeah.
And what I've seen is when it doesn't work is maybe 1 or 2 of those coming from those sides, maybe working together, but not all 3. Mm-hmm. And it sounds to me like maybe that's what Atlanta figured out, that magic formula of balancing those 3 things out. And partnering to move something forward of that magnitude. I would be really interested in talking with them just about how this happened. Didn't you at some point you pulled up their what was it, their city codes and ordinances, mm-hmm. or something like that, about urban agriculture? So they've gotten it changed all the way down to the core, right?
Yeah, they've made some major changes, and they really have used this program as like an economic development program. So one of the first things they did was starting to basically lease out vacant lots within the city to urban farmers. So they would put up this, they would say, we have, this is a city-owned lot. And then they did an RFQ, which is a request for qualifications, and people were able to apply to farm that lot basically. And the idea was it's kind of an in-between for people to get their urban farm up and running on an acre or so. And then ultimately they want them to expand to bigger farms on the outskirts of the city, and then switch that land over to a new urban farmer to kind of create new jobs and new businesses in a sustainable and healthy way.
So Kenny says you need people to manage those apartment gardens. Mm-hmm. I convinced back in 2010 5 people to get involved with one. We cleared the area, but you need so much labor and time and commitment. Your model of going in to manage them is where it's at. Learning gardens and bonus food. Mm-hmm. Kenny, I completely agree with you, but I'm still only one person. And like, I think there's something to that. But that's where I was talking about needing to get the private business, nonprofit, and government agencies involved, because if we really want to spread this out to an impactful level, where we're not just spitting in the bucket, you're going to need a lot of me's out there, I think. But I completely agree with you, because what we're really talking about here is we're not talking about the type of community garden where that almost takes a certain level of community to make it happen. Like when a bunch of community members get together, find a piece of land, organize, maybe even become a certain type of entity, get a bank account, go down and pull a community garden permit, pull their resources, get their volunteers, and build a community garden, and have a board, and then the actual people that walk onto the property of that community garden get a plot and are members of that garden. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, I mean, those, we are talking about those. There is a place for those. Really what we're talking about is almost like a city building pools, or an apartment complex building a pool. Yes, those need to be maintained by people who aren't there swimming. There's two separate, so Kimmy's absolutely right that the types of gardens that we're talking about, just like a pool at an apartment complex, that pool is not cleaned and maintained by the people who are swimming in it. It's an amenity. And we're talking about being able to build more community gardens in the city that are more like the city pools, that they're managed by an outside organization who could have possibly hired, either doing it internally or gotten tax funding to hire an outside private company to come in and maintain those pools, so that they can be up and running when the community wants to come in and swim. So you're absolutely right that they take a lot of work. They definitely do. Can you read these, Sean?
Yeah.
Okay. So Amanda's next one says, I get a lot of requests for composting in community gardens on site at condo and apartment complexes. The tighter we get packed into these cities, like Sean wants us to do, the more there's going to be a need for that. There's more. And I guess what we were talking about, what I kind of said in the description of this whole thing about the talks of food and food culture and food policy, food insecurity, and are they're just not at the moment part of the major conversations. When they redid Curtis Hickson Park and already had on the books, I think at that time was the main big buildings downtown. Mm-hmm. Was it the High Tower? What's that big apartment right there on Ashley called?
I'm not sure.
But you know the one you're talking about, right? Like literally when we're at Gasparilla Music Festival, we're staring at it right across the street, right?
Yes. Yes.
That was like still in the finishing stages. I want to say, I think they had already broken ground. It was being built, and they started working on Curtis Hickson Park. Mm-hmm. And I think at that same time, they were wrapping up a lot of stuff that was going on over in Channelside. So they knew people were going to be on top of each other. Mm-hmm. Without having to think about it, they built a dog park. In Channelside, they had places for people to walk their dogs. Yeah. In Channelside, they have places for people to park their cars. Mm-hmm. I guess what I'm trying to say is, how can we get?
How do we make it a standard?
What's that?
How do we make it a standard to also build space to grow food?
Or even if it's said no to. Mm-hmm. Even if it's like, no, we're not going to do it on this one. You know what I mean? Like, even if it's on the radar enough where they can, I would be happy. But it's not even happening because it's just not even on their radar. that
Yeah.
this is even a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, they're more focused on getting a grocery store in downtown than they are, getting places to grow food, which is fair. I mean, we need grocery stores in our downtowns as well.
Absolutely.
It's obviously necessary, but we also need places to grow food, and it's hard to justify in an urban setting where land is so expensive. You can't realistically expect them to set aside a lot that could be sold for $1 million for a garden. But you could put them on the amenity deck next to the pool, or you could, like Laura said in the comments, do hydroponics within your building. There's a lot of different things you could do.
Amanda Street says natural amenities are listed as top priorities for residents in surveys. Maybe we just need to talk louder.
Yeah. And I don't know why we don't see it in more apartment complexes. There are like huge master plan suburban communities that are popping up that are coined as agri-hoods. So they're, the same kind of suburban community that we're used to, but in the middle there is a productive farm that people can be exposed to, maybe volunteer at, or at the very least buy some produce from. So it's catching on in the huge master plan communities, but not so much in the apartment complexes. I don't see many of those, although there is a group in Atlanta, a property management group, where their specialty is apartment complexes that have gardens, which is really cool. Yeah,
that is super cool.
I think it's called Greenleaf Communities or something like that.
Okay. And you said that's what'd you say, a real estate company?
Yeah, I think it's a property management company where they have management. Yeah, they manage several apartment complexes and they have gardens at each one, and they even have people on staff that work the gardens. And then residents can either volunteer in the garden a certain amount of hours a month to get money off of their rent, or they could, I think, pay into a CSA type model, community supported agriculture, where they get produce delivered to their door if they pay in. So there's people doing it, just not here, unfortunately.
I wonder if there's ways that we can mix them into bigger programs that can be offered. So I know I did some work with an apartment complex for the Tampa Housing Authority, and they had people come in for the residents there. It was a over retirement age apartment complex for Tampa Housing Authority. Right. And they had people come in that did all kinds of stuff as far as health expos and meal planning. I'm almost thinking it might be an easier sell if it was made into a little bit of the kind of worked into a bigger picture of some sort of health aspect, that the garden became both a place for the other things to happen. Oh my God, I'm starting to sound like we did talk about our community gardens. It becomes a conduit for these other things to happen. Sound familiar? As well, a gathering place, whether it is having an on-site nutritionist who travels around and someone who talks about budget shopping, all types of stuff. If the garden actually became part of a larger program, I wonder if it would be an easier sell. So we got to hop off in just a minute, guys. All you people hopped on at the last minute. That's okay. That's cool. I'm glad to have y'all here. Jan says, this is so awesome. If liability is a major concern that landowners face, we need an insurance policy available and affordable for private landowners to lease land for community-minded gardeners. Something like formalized large-scale system that Fleet Farming Group is doing in Orlando. Jan, I have bad news for you. Fleet Farming didn't get it figured out either. Fleet Farming, that might not be because, like, the main reason, but they're a nonprofit. And being a nonprofit, they're actually able to run a blanket insurance policy that covers their ass on all that stuff that you're talking about. Being a for-profit business, we're not allowed those same amenities insurance wise, and then even depending on the type and size of nonprofit that you are. So short of these community gardens becoming their own nonprofit entity, I completely agree with you that things should not be forced to make them work down the tunnel of nonprofit world. That there should be homeowner insurance policies, landowner insurance policies to allow stuff like this. We actually here in Seminole Heights have a community garden that is a permanent community garden that is in a residential front yard of somebody who actually lives there as their primary residence. And I will get in touch with them and see what they have and what they've done as far as insurance policies. But that would be an insurance policy, I guess, that the individual organization or group is that's doing the farming or gardening. I think what Jan is poking at would be that if there was some sort of government, maybe insurance policy that a landowner could blanket under if they wanted to offer their land up to a group or an organization to protect that landowner. But right now, as far as my understanding is, it's done through the organization that's actually doing the gardening. I've just gone way above my pay grade on that. I'm just talking about things I've seen and heard. But it is definitely something to consider, because you're not going to have a bunch of people giving up their land to be used if liability is a concern. I think that's a major concern for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Talking about disconnect and things trying to happen, but since things aren't connected and not getting the synergy they need to move forward. Before we go, why don't you tell everybody about the really cool program that Tampa has going that isn't going anywhere because we can't figure out where the heck it came from, how it came into existence, and we definitely already figured out why it's not working. And that's the program of, you know what I'm talking about, right?
I think so.
With commercial properties for community gardens.
Okay. Yeah. So you want me to dive into that a little bit?
I want you to delve into that just a little bit, because I think it's fascinating that we have such a cool program. But because we don't have all the right people in place and the connections made, it was put together so poorly, it's basically unusable.
Yeah. So that's a portion of the City of Tampa's Community Garden Ordinance that allows community gardens to exist within the city. So based on that ordinance, you can have gardens in residential, office, or commercial zoning districts. There's also a caveat in the ordinance where if your garden is within an office or commercial zoning district, you can actually sell produce on a daily basis off of your site, which for all intents and purposes makes it an urban farm, more or less, being able to sell your produce on site. However, I haven't really seen it being used, mostly because all of the gardens that I am exposed to are in residential zoning districts. And those have restrictions on them where they can only sell produce, I think it's 4 times a year on site or something like that.
Whatever the garage sale rules are, that's what they fall under.
Yeah.
Legally, you can only have garage sales out of your house so many times a year.
Right.
But so that basically means that, yes, we can become an urban farmer here in the city of Tampa, but that's more of what I was talking about in the very beginning about kind of under the table going, yeah, we're a community garden, huh? And not being able to really stand up and be the entity and business that you say you are proudly, you know, and having to, just like that one business had to register as a nursery, just like for fleet farming to be able to get volunteers and employees and be able to go out into people's yards and garden, that they have like an insurance policy like a church that basically, you know, is umbrellaed and all their things are in there. And they're even listed as a landscaping company. They're not listed as agriculture. So they're not going into people's yards and harvesting produce. They're going into people's yards and trimming the plants. So, so even they had to like kind of, you know, register as something a little different than what they really are. What I was talking about, that was actually kind of cool because I'd forgotten about that. What I was actually talking about was the deal City of Tampa has with people who are behind on their taxes.
Okay, that's what I thought you were talking about originally, and then
Talking about that.
Yeah, so there was another ordinance that was passed probably 2 years ago where if a property has a tax lien on it, the owner can opt to forego paying the tax lien by allowing a nonprofit to form a community garden on their land, which sounds really cool. But we spent hours, you know, talking to the city, and you know, people at the city didn't even really know that had existed. And then we spoke with the city council members, the city council member who had gotten that passed, to try to kind of find a list of properties with tax liens and contact names so that we could actually make use of this program. And it was pretty much non-existent. So for this program to be used, it seems that a property owner with a tax lien would have to know about this ordinance and would have to seek out a nonprofit and then have them figure out how to put a garden on their land, versus people who have the ability and resources to start a garden can't really go out and find these property owners easily.
Well, wasn't another kind of a negative loophole that there was really nothing in there protecting the garden from getting thrown off the land in 2 years or 3 years, or you know, like they get their tax lien forgiven. Come on, build your garden. See ya.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing any language about, you know.
There was none. There was none. Yeah.
Time.
It was just really poorly crafted. I mean, again, there's people with good intentions getting in the right positions and in the right places. Mm-hmm. I think we need more connectivity. You know, sure. That's going to keep happening by having more conversations, and those are going to happen in the gardens. Mm-hmm. So all the big hitters are popping in right now, guys. We have been on for, holy cow, an hour and 21 minutes. Thank you, everybody who joined us. Thank you, everybody who's watching this video here in a couple weeks. If you would like to join me live, you can join me from Facebook or on YouTube. If you need to get off the book of faith over the next couple weeks, that might be good because there's a lot of craziness going on. And but you can still join me on YouTube. This is being simulcast right now live on YouTube and on Facebook. But if you cannot join me, you can rewatch these videos. But if you still want to be involved, you can send an email to me at info at whitwamorganics.com. And even though you don't know what our next topic is going to be about, you can post all your garden questions, comments, topic suggestions, and I will bring it up. Thank you so much, Sean, for joining me. Thank you, everybody who joined us. And you guys all have a good night. See you, Sean.
You guys.